Welcome to Mysteries to Die For and this toe tag. I am TG Wolff and I'm here with Jack, my piano player and producer. This is normally a podcast where we combine storytelling with original music to put you at the heart of a mystery. Today is a bonus episode that we call a toe tag. It's the first chapter from a fresh release in the mystery, crime, and thriller genre. And today's featured release is one of mine, Guilty by Association by TG Wolff. Alright, so Guilty by Association is a legal mystery. While waiting for the results of an internal affairs hearing, Miami detective Seth Rizk returns to Indiana to repay a debt posthumously. I always have trouble with that word. I probably shouldn't have written it. The retired cop who once helped solve the Rizk family's greatest tragedy has been found dead under suspicious circumstances. Seth leans into the resources of his twin brother Jakob, the interim attorney general for Indiana, but Seth's sins in Miami follow him north, and Jakob is caught in a storm. His campaign team issues an ultimatum: cut ties with your brother or lose the election. Bottom line, Guilty by Association is for you if you like mysteries that are a well-blended mix of heart, brains, and tension. All right, let's start the review. Now, the first part of the review, since it is my book, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. We'll read chapter 1, and then I will share some review comments from independent reviewers, give you a little bit of a taste of the storytelling. So this story is told from alternating points of view. Seth Rizk is a detective in Miami who faced an internal panel after rearranging the face of Detective Edward Bridges. On leave without pay, low on funds, and sick of his own company, Seth is the white knight who does not mind his cape getting dirty. Jakob Rizk unwillingly became the interim attorney general for Indiana and is now embroiled in a campaign to keep the job. With too many commitments, a pregnant wife with twins, and a brother in danger of losing his career, Jakob is the white knight who makes sure his cape stays the color of snow. Now, this mystery is about a suspicious death of Captain Declan Jameson, retired. Jameson was living at a high-end rehab facility after a car accident rearranged one of his legs. After no showing on a date, he was found a few days later washed up on a drainage pipe. Originally ruled an accident, Seth investigates and finds that something does indeed stink. The trail leads straight into a web of fraud, theft, and ambition, and a motive worth killing to protect. Okie doke. With that set up, let me change screens here, and we will jump into Chapter 1. Seth. Monday, T-20. Detective Sergeant Seth Rizk, Miami Police Department, Criminal Investigations, sat on a bench outside police headquarters. Frustration stacked upon anger over the last week until he was here, a bladder stretched to its limits. His right knee bounced, the equivalent of a weak stream of piss that kept the whole bladder from exploding. The internal affairs hearing into the brutal and unwarranted attack on a fellow officer was scheduled for 11 sharp. As if the sharp needed to be said. "Let's schedule the hearing for 7 minutes after midnight," said nobody, ever. Seth should be inside, practicing looking pathetic for letting things get out of hand. His representative's advice was to be apologetic and basically throw himself on the mercy of the 5-person panel who would determine if he could keep the career he'd built over the last 6 years. The thing was, as much as Seth loved his job, and he did love his job, he was having a hard time being sorry, even faking being sorry. He had no regrets about rearranging those perfect white teeth Bridges used to fool pretty young things like Desi. He was the Venus flytrap of vice cops, an attractive and sweet-smelling temptation he lured in the desperate and afraid and then, snap, ate him up alive. His phone rang. Oscar Marino, his rep. Seth dismissed the call, raised his head against the back of the bench, and closed his eyes. He felt helpless and more than a little useless. Besides him and Bridges, one other person knew the truth of what happened, Desi Blanche. It was a no-brainer to Seth to have Desi testify in his behalf. She could not only back up his account, but could also show bridges for the worm he was. Oscar had shut it down without a thought. Desi was 20 years old and a prostitute. She had a history of lying to cops. Oscar thought credibility with both the retired cops and the community do-gooders on the panel would do more harm than help his case. Maybe Oscar was right, but Seth wasn't going to sit by and put his hands in the career of something he didn't have: hope. Last Friday, Seth found her. He explained, without going into detail, how much trouble he was in and asked for her help. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she turned him down. With her mother and younger brother to help support, she didn't have the luxury of making Bridges an enemy. Well, a bigger enemy. Seth understood, but he pressed the card he'd prepared into her hand. "Just think about it," he asked. "The hearing is Monday. You wouldn't only be helping me, but you'd also be exposing Bridges for what he is." She'd taken the card and then solemnly shut the door in his face. So here he was, preparing to swallow the last thing he had, his pride, by pretending he was sorry. It was the only defense he had to prevent having the best part of his life ripped away from him, and that just sucked. If he wasn't a detective, what was he? Who was he? His phone rang again. John Butch Wallace. Seth almost smiled. Butch was the old-school PI who took an 11-year-old Seth under his wing shortly after his mother was killed. Seth answered the phone quickly, running away from that thought. "Hey, Butch. You called to wish me luck?" "I thought that bullshit hearing was this morning." Butch's worn and craggy voice, the hard-earned result of a lifetime of smoking, drinking, and rock and roll. "Still is morning. Supposed to start in..." He glanced at his watch with the mother-pearl face. 16 minutes. "What's going on?" "Well, shit. Sorry. Look, you take care of yourself now. Call me after, though. It's important." Seth had long ago learned to read between Butch's lines. The print might have been small, but the message was in glowing neon lights. Big problem. "Tell me now. I need something to distract me from the circus about to start." Butch huffed. "Do you remember Detective Jameson with the South Bend PD?" "How could I forget him? He gave you the tip that led to finding my mother's killer. Is he in trouble?" "Well, you could say that." Tension-building pause. "Jameson is dead. He was murdered." Mic drop. Seth leaned forward, elbows on his knees, neither of which were bouncing now. In his business, you wouldn't think death could surprise him, but here he was, stunned. Jameson was a hero from his childhood. He didn't stop working the case even when it went cold, and Seth had learned the value of persistence from the cop, a lesson that served him well. Shit, what happened? "Well, he supposedly fell in a creek. His body washed up on a storm drain grate on Saturday. The preliminary report is accidental drowning, but that's bullshit, Seth. Grade A bullshit. You have more time off, right?" The non sequitur threw him, and yes, Seth knew what the term meant. "You could say that. They aren't letting me come back until the panel makes its recommendation in 7 to 10 days. Ridiculous. Seth's mind could not wrap around a childhood hero being a tragic accident. "Why do you think it's murder?" "Because, damn it, I know Jameson." Butch's shout was answered by reverberating metal. Must have slammed his fist on his desk. "I need you to come up here and investigate. I called in a few favors to get you the access you need." "Butch, you know I owe Jameson, and more than that, I respected him. But I don't get why you need me. The South Bend cops know what they're doing." "Yeah, but they gotta play by the rules," said the man whose motto was, "If you aren't cheating, you aren't trying." "They're tore up. I mean, Jameson retired as a captain. A lot of people looked up to him. If the coroner rules it an accident, well, their hands are tied. Jameson's old partner, Stanton, his kid is the detective on the case. He's crying bullshit too. The coroner is stalling her decision to try to give him more time to turn something up. That's a lot of bullshit. Seth respected Butch's instincts. He had a talent for separating the shit from the shinola. If Butch said there was something to find, smart money would back him. Declan fucking Jameson. Well, Seth hadn't thought about him in years. He remembered a man with huge hands and a soft voice, like scary soft. Seth couldn't imagine the man he knew sleeping with the, ducks? And the clock was ticking. The coroner couldn't hold off a verdict forever. Maybe he could take a few days and see what he could dig up. No matter how the hearing went today, Seth would have nothing to do but second-guess everything until the results came in. And even Seth didn't want to spend that much alone time with himself. "Risky, what are you doing?" Seth lifted his eyes to see his rep, Oscar, running down the stairs, exasperation on his face. "I have to go, Butch. I'll call you back as soon as I can." Seth ended the call. By then, the stocky man was standing over him. "I'm contemplating the meaning of life." His, Jameson's, his again. "You do that on your own time, my man. Right now you're on my clock and we're both on the review panels." Oscar looked Seth over as he rose. "You look good." Seth held open the sides of his cream linen jacket. "You told me to clean up." The pants were coordinated, as was the untucked soft green button-down shirt. He wore his favorite dress shoes. His shoulder-length hair was slick with product and tied in a low tail. It was Miami chic, sure. It wasn't like he wore a suit. "What do you want me to do, Oscar? Roll around in the sand?" Oscar cocked his head as if seriously considering. "No, that won't work." Seth's pulse heated. "The hell, Oscar? You said dress nice. You said it would make a good impression." "Look, man, I passed Bridges in the hall. You fucked him up good. He's in this back and neck brace, so he can't look without turning around. Completely sympathetic." Seth stopped himself from enjoying the result of his hands-on approach to Bridges' policing methods, but he couldn't prevent the sneer at the asshole's name. He should have one of those halos, like the other dogs wear. "We talked about this, Risky. You cannot be aggressive toward that man. Not in there." He pointed to the building looming in front of them. "You leave it out here. You hear me, man? You leave it right on this bench. You can pick it up on your way out." Oscar glanced at his phone. "Less than 10 minutes. We gotta get in there. We don't need to start off by being late." Seth wasn't all in on Oscar's strategy, but he didn't doubt the guy had his best interest at heart. Since their first meeting, he'd been all about the we. "We're on shaky ground. We can't give them any reason to remand the case." The he part of we still didn't like it, but he was out of time, out of choices. "All right, Oscar, we'll play it your way. Let's see what we can do about keeping me employed." "Let's do this!" Oscar clamped his shoulder, a manager pumping up a fighter. "We go in there with the mentality to win. We leave it all on the table and walk out with no regrets." That was an analogy Seth could embrace. He'd always been a fighter. He wasn't going to stop now. If the situation called for believable contrition, he'd load an AK-47 with bullets of regret and spray the panel till they were soaking in it. Okay, maybe not the right analogy. Point being, his pride didn't matter, except it did. Winning mattered, always, especially against a waste like Bridges. Abso-fucking-lutely. Seth gave a sharp nod. "No regrets. Not today, not tomorrow. Let's go win this bitch." Into the building and through security, Seth kept his chin up. Winners did not look at their feet. Down the hallway where the only sound was the high-tech rubber soles on the tile, he rolled his shoulders, loosening up. Through the doors matching 100 others in the building, he kept his breathing paced. Some battles were won by weapons, others by conditioning. This one would be won by wits. This one, a suit sat in Oscar's chair. The suit looked over his shoulder, and the face Seth saw every day of his life frowned. "Who is that?" "Jesus," Oscar said as the suit stalked toward them. "He could be your twin." Part of Seth wanted to jump up and fist pump at the sight of Jakob stalking toward them in one of his fancy-ass suits. The rest of him was afraid his voice would crack, choked as he was on emotion. He is my twin. Yep. Voice crack. Jakob never glanced at Oscar, his focus 100% on Seth. You're late, he said, each word laced with accusation. Of course, those would be the first words out of his mouth. Seth glanced at his watch. 3 minutes early, he grinned, knowing it would annoy his brother. What are you doing here? Saving your ass. Jakob looked him up and down. At least you dressed like a grown-up. Excuse me, Oscar said. I'm representing Detective Rizk today. Not anymore, the brothers said in unison. Seth may not have asked for Jakob's help, but he was too high on the IQ scale to turn him down. Jakob believed the best defense was an aggressive offense, at least in the courtroom. Seth reversed the clamp on Oscar's shoulder. You're good, O, and I'm glad you've been on my side this last week, but you're a pitcher just called up from the minors while Jakob here is a future Hall of Famer. If we want to win, we need to go with a ringer. He turned to Jakob. What's your plan? Rule number 1, Jakob said. I do all the talking. Rule number 2, do not break rule number 1. A gavel struck twice, wielded by an elder man sitting center. It's 11 o'clock, Mr. Moreno. Are you ready to begin? Oscar opened his mouth, but Jakob responded, I'm representing Detective Rizk in these proceedings. I am Jakob Rizk, licensed to practice law in Florida. Jakob walked up the aisle like he owned it. Seth followed in his wake, having no idea what his brother was planning and every confidence that it would work. Sit, Jakob said, pointing Seth to the waiting seat and pad of legal paper. He picked a folder off of the table and proceeded to hand it to the panel chair. The chair glanced skeptically through the pages, raising an eyebrow at one in particular. This isn't legally binding proceeding, Mr. Rizk. He passed the folder to his right. Our role is to determine what degree our officers should be held accountable for the accusations against him or her, and make recommendations to the chief for further action. I respect your loyalty to your brother, but this is not a place for an attorney general. I understand the role and power of this panel, Jakob said, as the folder was passed and read. I'm here as me, not as an attorney general, to represent a man I know to be an asset to the city of Miami and this police department. The panel had 5 people, 4 men, 1 woman, 3 over retirement age, 2 in the nebulous middle. 2 Seth had run into before and maybe should have chosen his words more carefully. The woman he'd slept with, it was years ago. The room was permanently set for this little charade. They must have expected some hot cases to build it with a gallery of 7 rows of 7 chairs. Today, only 1 was taken. Front row, opposite side, sat Bridges, and that face of his wasn't so pretty anymore. The door opened. Lieutenant Rodriguez led the entirety of the criminal investigation's day shift in, claiming seats on his side. They moved with practiced silence, but flashed thumbs up and pumped fists in support. The septuagenarian finally opened the proceedings with a bunch of blah blah diddy-da. Counselor, the aged voice said to the other side of the aisle, call your first witness. Detective Edward Bridges. Seth's knees started to bounce again, this time matching his heart. This shit just got real. Jakob, Monday, 11:15 a.m. Jakob didn't know what he expected to happen when Seth saw him, but an arrogant smirk and snide remark wasn't it. He'd worked his butt off for the last week to uncover exactly how deep Seth was in. He'd rearranged his schedule, worked 18-hour days, and right now was missing a very important meeting with the governor and the Secretary of State to be here. Not wanting to unpack what he was feeling, Jakob went to a place where he was always in control, litigator mode. He again appraised his opponent. The man had skin so tan and leathery, his eyes appeared to hover outside their sockets. He wore dress pants and a flower print shirt and a tie. It would have looked ridiculous, but 3 of the 5 men on the panel dressed similarly. That made Jakob's favorite suit look overdone. He slipped off his jacket and draped it over the back of his chair. Detective Edward Bridges made his way across the open floor. Jakob measured the man Seth had pounded on. He was over 6 foot with the square jaw Hollywood loved to hire. Tan skin, sun-streaked hair, dark brown eyes, solid build. He'd be the picture of manly men, if not for the upper body brace and neck guard. Seth was dark by comparison, except for his light blue eyes, which currently were radiating anger. He was leaner, but no less powerful. Sitting at the table, the muscle in his jaw flexing, he looked like a Florida panther ready to pounce. At least, it had been a fair fight. "Take your time, Detective," the Leatherface addressed the panel as his witness shuffled to the appointed table and chair. "The testimony will show that Detective Sergeant Seth Rizk violently and without any provocation attacked Detective Sergeant Edward Bridges. The severity of the attack was unprecedented and demands action be taken to protect all who work for the Miami Police Department." Working as an assistant county prosecutor for 5 years, Jakob had seen many a stage testimony. Little in a courtroom was unplanned. Both sides had scripts, roles, costumes, and sometimes makeup. Bridges took it to a new level with the medical props. Walking to the witness table, he carried himself with an air of composure that rose above the wires and braces holding his upper body together. The rehearsed scene was paying off. The sole female panelist looked like she wanted to kiss his boo-boos. 2 of the men nodded in appreciation of Bridges' stoic suffering. "Detective Bridges," Leatherface said, "you have been with Vice for the past 5 years, correct?" When Bridges agreed, Leatherface began a long list of the witness's accomplishments and accommodations. Bridges' eyes drifted to Seth, and then he lifted his chin and spoke with pained humility. "I live up to the commitment every cop makes. While I appreciate the accolades, none was mine alone." Bridges spoke with an impediment resulting from the wires holding his jaw in place. "Can everybody hear me? I apologize, but this is the loudest I can talk." Nice move, Jakob thought. Courteous and deferential with just a touch of pathetic. Jakob had reviewed the medical report and had his own expert, his wife, translate the 28-letter Latin words into English. Bridges' injuries were real, but he was not on his last leg, and the fight had taken place a month ago. "We can hear you just fine," Leatherface said. "Tell the panel what happened on the night in question." "I was filling in for an officer called in sick." Bridges covered his mouth and cleared his throat. "My apologies." Leatherface checked in with the panel, even gave Jakob a cursory eyebrow raise. "Please don't strain yourself, Detective. Continue." "Well, following the assignment sheet, I patrolled my designated area when I saw a prostitute work in a corner. I turned on my lights and pulled over, and she didn't run, she just stood there with her hands on her hip like she owned the neighborhood. When I suggested she get a good job, she responded that jobs were like men, all the good ones taken. She hadn't eaten, so I took her to a food truck and bought her 2 tacos and a drink. I drove to a quieter place where we talked while she ate." Seth snorted. He rocked back in his chair, arms crossed, his body language screaming defiance. Managing perception was a large ingredient in winning. Bridges presented a picture of a good dog that got kicked. The last thing Jakob needed was for the panel to see Seth as a man who would kick a good dog when he was down. One of the younger men on the panel, the one without a hearing aid, watched Seth intently. "Relax," Jakob ordered in a sharp whisper. "Doesn't matter what he says. Do not react." Bridges shifted his attention from the internal affairs attorney to the panel, another calculated pose. "That's when Detective Rizk pulled open the driver's door and yanked me out. He began to hit me. Taken by surprise by one of our own, I wasn't able to defend myself." The attorney leaned his hip on the prosecution's table. I'm confused, Detective Bridges. Are you telling me and this panel that Detective Rizk gave no warning, no reason for attacking you? Well, that's correct. I didn't know who it was at first. I thought maybe it was the girl's pimp. He pinned me against my car and punched me in the jaw. The blow must have stunned me because I don't exactly remember what happened next. I know I fought back. My knuckles were torn up. I fell down and I was afraid he was going to kill me. And that's when I heard the sirens. They saved me. When did you realize it was a fellow cop and not a pimp? After the unit arrived, one of the patrolmen held Rizk back and called him by his rank. I could not believe it. Had you and Detective Rizk had issues previously? Leatherface asked. Bridges inhaled and let it out solemnly. You could say that. I became aware of a conflict between one of his cases and my vice work. I went to him and asked him to take a back seat on his investigation because it threatened to expose my informant. That's not what he said, Seth whisper shouted in Jakob's ear. He told me to back off or he'd fuck me up and my case. Easy, Jakob said. These details were important, critical to his counter-argument, but as Seth lost his cool, he could argue until he was blue in the face and get nowhere. The panel chair lifted his hand. Did you want to say something, Mr. Rizk? Seth planted his palms on the table. Hell... Oh, Jakob finished, and no, not at this time. Did Detective Rizk comply? Leatherface asked with the leading lilt that answered the question. He did not. He said his case took precedent and then told me to do something that was anatomically impossible. I did that, Seth admitted, and for someone as slimy as Bridges, it's not impossible. Aren't you going to write anything down? Jakob shook his head. Quiet. I need to listen. I have a concussion and traumatic brain injury. Bridges proceeded to list everything on the medical report, in order, no bruise forgotten. Impossible, Seth muttered. He doesn't have a brain. My jaw's broken in 2 places, 3 ribs are cracked, and then blah, 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 Seth mumbled. He's milking it, Jakob. Can't you object or something? The panelists were becoming distracted, watching Seth nearly as much as Bridges. While Jakob liked that they weren't giving Bridges their full attention, a negative impression could poison them against his brother. Seth, he said softly, rule number 3, shut up. In his peripheral vision, he saw his twin cross his arms and slouch in his chair. The look wasn't any better than his defiant pose, especially when Bridges was sitting up there like a paragon of pain and suffering. Jakob nudged him. Sit up and look like you're listening but not effective. Write whatever you want to say on the pad and then never say it. Seth sat up and leaned forward, elbows on the table. He picked up the pen and began scribbling. At least he was quiet. The doctors, Bridges' voice cracked, they said it'll take months of therapy before I can return to full duty. Seth huffed. Miami's safer for it. I guess I should be grateful all I'm facing is a few weeks of late duty, Bridges said solemnly, lowering his head. Then he lifted his gaze to Seth, and ready, aim, fired. If Rizk got his way, the only thing in my future would be a casket. Seth surged to his feet. You're a fucking liar, Bridges. Jakob was a millisecond slow getting to his feet. I object, he stated, simultaneous sweeping Seth behind him. Rule number 2. The panel chair pointed a finger as narrow and rigid as the pen he held. This isn't a courtroom, Mr. Rizk. You can't object. But your point is taken. And detective, you will mind your language. Seth didn't back down, but hung over Jakob's shoulder. Instead of worrying about my language, you should be worried about the lies he's telling. Jakob thrust his elbow back, setting Seth in his place. Enough, he growled through clenched teeth. You're gonna go down, Rizk, Bridges shouted through his locked jaw, proving exactly how much louder he could talk. You fucked with the wrong guy. Language, the chair shouted, banging his gavel. Jakob shouted over the noise. I request a 15-minute recess to confer with my client. This isn't a court. Oh, fine, the chair said, bringing the gavel down again. 15 minutes. Soak your heads and cool off before I lose my temper and you both end up on traffic duty until the Dolphins win the Super Bowl. Jakob wrapped Seth's long tail of hair around his fist. Come with me. And that is the first chapter of Guilty by Association. So as of this recording, Guilty by Association is not out yet. So I am going to share a few excerpts of reviews from the first book in the series, Murder on Sight, that talk to the storytelling style, so you can see if this might be for you. Hallway's blog said, perfect pacing, memorable characters, and liberal doses of danger and deception and humor will keep readers thoroughly entertained and engaged. Highly recommend. From Sunesna's blog, she says, I loved how the story kept making me question what justice actually means, following the law or doing what is right. Overall, this book feels like one of those hidden gems, which is fast-paced, thought-provoking, and hard to put down. And Guatemala Paula Loves to Read said, great characters and an intriguing murder mystery land this book on the top of my top books of the year. Well, thank you, Paula. While the subject, a tragic murder, is serious, the author works quite a bit of humor into the story through dialogue. I happily read this book in one sitting, riveted by its pages. Guilty by Association is the second book in the Rizk Brothers Legal Mystery series. This is a series where reading the first book really is the best idea. Not for the mysteries, those end up standing alone, but for the stories and the backstories of the characters. Guilty by Association was released from Thule Publishing and is promoted by Partners in Crime Tours and is available for online book retailers. Links are in the show notes. So, about me. You all hear me every week, but what do you really know about me? So I have never been able to resist a good puzzle. With an engineer's mind for logic and a lifelong love of mysteries, I craft whodunit stories that challenge readers to outsmart me and my detectives. My books are filled with quirky characters, red herrings, and because I firmly believe solving fictional murders should be fun, a healthy dose of humor. I have earned both my bachelor's and master's degree in civil engineering, learning early to see that every problem is a mystery, and that each solution as the answer. Well, apparently English is not my first language. Learning early to see every problem as a mystery and each solution as the answer, the result of asking the right questions. I think I have to reread that one more time. That same curiosity drives my fiction, where nothing is ever accidental and every detail counts. When I'm not plotting fictional crimes, I'm a mystery reader and reviewer. You guys hear those on the toe tags, but then often I'll put reviews directly on my Instagram or my website. I'm also the co-creator and co-host of the whodunit mystery podcast, Mysteries to Die For. A Cleveland, Ohio native, I now live in Northeast Indiana with my husband, 2 sons. You know one of them, Jack. And in our house, dogs and mysteries are always welcome. Sign up for my newsletter. I call it On the Prowl, and it comes out every full moon, as every good wolf should. It's filled with puzzles, a little bit about what I'm reading, a little about what I'm writing. Can't actually call it a newsletter. We'll just call it a newsletter. And sign up on my website, which is tgwolff.com. Wondering what to read after you finish Guilty by Association? Partners in Crime Tours is your ultimate destination for all things mystery, crime, thriller, and cozy. Since 2011, they've been working to fill bookshelves with gripping and heart-pounding reads. Discover new mystery series and connect with other fans with Partners in Crime. Look up Partners in Crime Tours on the web or your favorite social media. And authors, whether you're looking to promote your latest thriller, discover a new mystery series, or connect with fellow fans of the genre, PICT has you covered. Check out their promotion options that come with the attention of a dedicated coordinator. Join us next week for Season 9, Stuff That Can Kill You. Jason Little, one of Jack's favorite M2D4 storytellers, is up to bat. It's Finely Ground Karma, where mechanics is our sticky means of murder. All right, Jack, take us out.